Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. Today, I'm going to answer a question from somebody who reached out and asked, Robyne, how do I support my kids heading back to school? And how do I support myself? I love this question because of that kind of two-pronged nature, wanting to set up our children for success, but also recognizing we want to make sure we are okay in the process. So on today's episode, I thought we can explore that big idea and we'll look at the multiple different seasons. So for our littles, our middles, and for our bigs. So I'm so glad that you are here. Thanks for tuning in. And without further ado, let's dive in. So, where my kiddos are at right now, I have my oldest Hunter, who is off to his third year of university. Ava is going into second year university, and Jax is going into potentially his last year of high school. I say potentially because there's always options for perhaps another go around. But as of right now, he is heading into his last year of high school. What I can share with you are some strategies and tips that I found that worked really well while they were in elementary school. I'll tell you a wee bit about some ideas from high school and also that season I'm in right now. I'm still learning about this season as well, is when our older children are transitioning to post secondary, perhaps outside of the home. When my kiddos were little, one of the things that I found, excuse me, so much comfort in is the fact that their school systems and how the school was structured, that there really wasn't a time when anyone was by themselves. And what I mean by that is even when Jackson was in kindergarten, like his older brother and sister were already in the same school. So right off the hop, I felt that I was at this wee bit of an advantage because I knew they had their siblings. And I just want to recognize that there's a lot of that's pretty fortunate when you know your kids can kind of look after each other. And especially because of the relationship that our three children have, pretty much since they were little, they've been best friends. And so I had this, again, I think this pretty substantive advantage of the fact that I knew that Hunter had a watchful eye. I knew Ava was out there too. And she, oh my gosh, she can be pretty scrappy looking after her brothers. Again, Ava activated. I had no fear. And also knowing that Jax, even when he was in his littlehood, he had his siblings. There were a few practices, though, that we found worked really well in our house for kind of preparing in the mornings, getting them ready for school, because the mornings are when they were a little bit chaotic. And some of the strategies that I found super helpful, and you've probably already heard some of these, so they're not new, as much as possible to have things ready the night before, right? So, and include them in the process. So, I would include them in the process even when they were in kinder to get their stuff, get it at the front door, get everything as kind of set up the night before as possible. Anytime I would leave things to the morning, oh my gosh, I was it was likely not going to end well. And I referred to this kind of season where I would go from Mary Poppins, where I'd be like, okay, children, everybody gather your things, to Batman in a heartbeat, where I'd be like, get in the damn car. Right. So I appreciate that mornings were chaotic. So anything we could do to simplify mornings was really helpful. The other piece that I also found extremely helpful is whenever possible, give children agency about how they want to do their mornings. And what I mean by that is just because there were three of them, it didn't mean we had to do it exactly the same for everyone. Just giving them a wee bit of agency in terms of how they like their mornings to go. So, for example, Ava liked to have everything locked in, organized the night before. She liked to have, even her little outfit picked out, right? She wanted things really in that sense of order. The boys, like, they were pretty good just to kind of, one of the strategies we would do is I would like essentially like pick 2 or 3 things out for them the night before, and then in the morning they could just pick whatever they wanted. So again, giving them a wee bit of agency. The other part that was really helpful was sticking to the time when we had to roll out. And I've shared this before. Time is not my time, and I have a pretty fractured relationship because of part of my ADHD with time blindness. So, like bringing them in board to understanding like when was go time. So, those are a few little strategies. I also remember really early on in their earlyhood for school, I remember hearing all about these, families that were making these like beautiful lunches and, they were just doing all these like amazing, gorgeous bento boxes that had little dinosaurs and all this kind of stuff. I just accepted very early on that I was not going to be able to do that. That wasn't something that was like a priority for me. And, we would always even joke around with the kids where, I remember one time, like, I thought, oh, parents are supposed to like write notes for their kids. So we should write these little notes. And I recall sending a little note and the kids, like, it's just on a post it note, just thinking of you, love you. And, when they got home that night from school, I asked them, oh, how was that? And I remember Jackson was in a wee bit of a mood, and I'm like, "Buddy, what's the matter?" And he's like, "I can't even read." I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" He goes, "You put something in my lunchbox. I can't read." And I was like, "Fair. Okay." So apparently 4-year-olds don't want notes from their mom in their lunchbox. And he said, "Can you just wait till I can learn how to read?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I said, "You could have asked maybe your teacher for help." And he's like, "I didn't know what you had written." So I love that Jackson was always like already like, "Oh, I better filter my mom." I'm like, "Dude, I wouldn't have written anything like inappropriate that you couldn't have shown your teacher." And he's like, yeah, just wait till I can learn how to read." So again, just even thinking about that, the reality is I don't think I ever did write lunch notes to Jax. But hey, guess what? He's in a senior in high school and it all worked out. Okay, so having a wee bit of structure and order, giving the children a wee bit of agency. My other gentle invitation for getting our kids ready for school, I feel like there's this tension between like rushing our kids into adulthood. And what I mean by that is like, okay, so when you go to like grade 1, we're getting ready for grade 2. And when you're grade 3, you're getting ready for grade 4. And when you're in your senior year of high school, you're getting ready for college or university or trades. Or when you're in grade 8, you're getting ready for grade 9. Like there's this kind of tendency that the year we're in only matters because of it setting you up for success for the next year. And I find that there's a tension there for me because I also want them to enjoy the year. I want them to enjoy what it feels like to be in your senior year and not being so focused on the next year. I want them to be present and enjoy it right now. So, as a parent, as an educator, I've always felt that wee bit of a tension. And I like to remind them, like, just like enjoy it, right? That this isn't all about preparation. This isn't all about the future. This is now. And the reality is, the future isn't promised to any of us. So I want to make sure, and one of the practices I've used with the children is to really make sure that they had this like full permission to enjoy the year that they are in. Make the best of the year that they are in. Yes, it is setting them up for the future, but I also think it's just really important for today. Now, when I think about how I supported the children going into high school, and a question somebody recently asked me, which I thought was really powerful, they said, Robyne, I've read your material, I've read your books. You had a horrible go at high school. I thought that was putting it very politely. And how did you not allow your own bias about school and educational systems and even educators not impact your kids? Now, I really appreciated that question because that was something that, from my perspective, I had to put a lot of work into because I did have a wee bit of a chip on my shoulder about certain parts of the high school education system, specifically around what's called in Ontario a streaming process. So, streaming is essentially when we decide you either are in the trades route, the college route, or like the university academic route. And very early in high school, people are forced into these categories. And I struggle with that because I don't really know how a child who's like 13 should be in a position to making choices that again are going to be indicative of what options are available to them when they're going into post-secondary or if they choose to go into post-secondary. So again, I'm mindful that like yes, the future is important, don't get me wrong, I get that. However, I feel that that streaming process is a wee bit problematic. And again, I understand why, right? If you have somebody who is achieving in a very traditional learning model, who learns a particular way, and you have people in other kind of areas of their learning, having them in the same space is very hard to provide consistent instruction, right? I totally get that. However, allowing children to have the opportunity to learn and to explore different topics and areas, and even just learning to learn skills, like that could, again, have a huge impact on how well they're able to do. So, to answer this moment's question about how did you not let your biases affect your children, I think for me, what was helpful is having a really open dialogue with them that school is important, but it's not everything. Like, school is important, but it is not going to make or break your future. And what I mean by that is I wanted them to understand there is a value in education, there's a value in the discipline of the learning model. However, school isn't designed for everybody. As somebody with ADHD, as someone with learning disabilities, I know firsthand school is not designed for people who learn like I do. So, again, when they were going into those high school years, this is important, but it isn't the only thing that is important. So, we were really open in our house about what matters most. What matters most to me is that the children were respectful and kind. What matters most is the children tried, that they showed up and locked in and gave effort. I also was very well aware that the outcomes, like the grades, that is so subjective. It is so subjective. So I didn't let this expectation that they had to have these certain grades, it dictates success. So we had a very fluid definition of success. We didn't have it based on grades. I also was very well aware when we look at the longitudinal research on who are the healthiest, most adaptive, who are the people who really feel at the end of their life that like their life was a good lived, well lived life. Like, what does it take? B plus people, literally B plus. Like people who were rolling in their like lower 70s, mid 70s, those were the people who had the highest quality of life scores. It wasn't the people who were in the high 90s, it wasn't the 80s, and it wasn't the 50s or the 60s students either. It was the students that were in like that B plus category had the highest life satisfaction. Now, it's hard as a parent sending them into high school saying like work hard but not too hard because I want you to stay in that B plus category. What does that represent? That B plus category? To me, it represents this diversity of school is important, but it isn't the only thing, right? And I remember so often, even when I was teaching at university, where students would be like, if I fail this exam, it's done. It's like, it is over. It is sudden death. It is over. If I don't get this grade, my future's cooked. I don't think any one piece of an assessment should ever dictate somebody's ability to live their life and be able to achieve their goals. There's lots of different ways. So I encourage people to be like flexible about the method, but have a kind of a good eye on where you're heading, but recognize there's so many different trailheads to get in there. Now, the other piece that I did share with my children going into high school and in the high school years is to remember that teachers are people too. Like, these are people who have feelings, who have lives, who have stressors. They're people too. And that there's going to be some great teachers and there's going to be some unskilled teachers. There's going to be some burned out educators. There's going to be some people that you just don't get along with. And I think there's this misconception with our children and our teenagers that we expect them to get along with everyone. As grown-ups, we don't even get along with everyone. There's this basic undercurrent of respect, but just recognize you don't have to get along with everyone, that you aren't expected to, have these like amazing experiences in every class. Some of the classes are just going to be get it done. Some classes are going to be okay. And my hope is at every semester, you have at least one class and one connection that feels really good. And again, it's just managing our expectations. Now, the other kind of little caveat there is I grew up when I was going to school, and I think this was just kind of the times is my parents put enormous amount of kind of like belief and confidence in the educators and not so much necessarily in me as the student. And what I mean by that is I actually felt like there was like I had a little bit of fear. I had a little bit of tension where like my parents would side with the teachers. And again, I don't judge my parents for that. They were, they were doing the best that they could. They were using the skills that they had at the time to parent me through all this. So there's zero judgment there. This isn't about holding them accountable. But I do recognize that my parents sided with the educators more often than not. And what was really important to me when the kids were in high school is that they knew that I had their back. So if they ran into a challenging situation with an educator, my kids, I needed them to know that, like, heck, even if you screw up, like, I'll stand with you. Like, I'll stand behind you. And this isn't going to be like us, the grown-ups versus the kids. Like, you're always going to have mama in your corner. Now, that didn't mean that I would, like I was okay with bad behavior or like disrespect. Absolutely not at all. But the children, I wanted them to have the confidence that I always had their back. If it came down to any type of a power struggle or some type of issue with an educator, that I would literally scorch earth for my kids. And I think that gave them this flexibility and this like freedom that they knew that they could stand up for themselves, that they could kind of protect themselves, that they knew that they were okay. I felt very alone at different seasons in school where it was kind of like everybody against Robin. So that was another thing. I let them know I had their back. And I can give you an example where I did have to intervene one time. There was an educator once who, for some reason, I'm not sure what their thinking was. And again, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm working with positive intent. But one of the exercises they asked the students to do was to um, basically do a critical thinking assignment about a podcast that I was a guest on. So, so again, I'm not really sure what this educator thought, but they wanted to critique me, and my child was in the class. I wasn't a huge fan of that assignment because it actually felt a wee bit personal. And what I ended up doing, and it was actually Hunter who was in that class. And I remember him coming home and he's like, Mama, I was really uncomfortable today in this class. And I'm like, oh, what happened? And he said, we had to like basically do this critique about like how, about something that you said. And this was a class assignment. And I just felt like it was uncomfortable. And it was even introduced to the class that like, this is Hunter's mother. What the F? Can we just hold space and be like, what the F? Anyway, I did reach out to the educator and I'm like, I need to understand what was the point of this? What was the point of this? And basically the educator didn't really have any justification other than the fact that he thought that what he said to me was something to the effect that this idea of like, your kids, doing okay in school, but you don't have to do great in school. And just the fact that, if a student wants to become a dentist or if a student wants to become a doctor, that you're really doing a disservice by suggesting that, students have a more balanced approach. And, if your kid's really talented in sports, like really let them pursue sports because that teaches them even things that sometimes they won't learn in the classroom. And anyway, the argument was that, the teacher was trying to say that B plus students, no, you have to do better than that. Anyway, so the reason, again, I'm using that as an example is the fact that like Hunter felt okay to challenge a situation in the classroom and he knew I would have his back. I think those are helpful. I digress. Okay, now with our kids going off to post secondary, I think the biggest tip I can give anyone if you're asking for tips on how do you set your kids up for post secondary success, your emotions as the grown up are not your kid's responsibility. Now, that goes all the way from littlehood all the way up to university, college, and trades. But I think it needs to be reiterated the most here when they're going off to school, especially post secondary, their well being, it needs to be their focus. As a grown up, we have to like hold it together. Now, that doesn't mean I want you to ignore and override your emotions. I have just seen so many parents send their kids away on this guilt trip of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to be so lonely. I'm going to miss you so much. I'm not going to be able to breathe. And you have to call me every single day. And I need to know that you are safe. And holy goodness, this is their opportunity to practice all those great skills and independence And this is their chance to go live and chase their big dreams. So I think it's important that we recognize that as grown-ups, yeah, we have big emotions around our children in any type of a transition, but our responsibility as parents is to like handle our own stuff. We don't have to put that on the kid. And I encourage you, like, by all means, like when you do that drop off, you put on that brave face, right? You hold them tight and you're like, I believe in you and I know you got this. Make the best of this time. Have fun, enjoy it. Yeah, make sure there's a wee bit aside of school and the learning as well. You got to do the bookie with the party, but just give them the freedom that this is their season and when you get in the car, that's when you can like literally turn into a mess. And I hope you have someone or people around you that can help you navigate your emotions and process it. But please don't put that on your kids. It's the same as, again, even when they're little and they're heading off to kinder school, right? It's not their responsibility. And kids have enough to navigate. I just want to make sure that we're not putting added pressure on them that we have to be okay and they're responsible for our emotions as well. The other gentle piece that I think is extremely important with their kiddos heading off to university is that we create just a few, and Hunter and I did this when he left, just a few kind of like rules of engagement. Right? Rules of engagement in terms of like, there's a few kind of expectations, even though, you're going to be doing your own thing. That doesn't mean it's like a free for all in the sense that you actually do have a few responsibilities still with the family unit and what that was me kind of shifting from this place of parenting to more of like mentorship where letting him know that, I still expect you to kind of check in with your siblings, right? Just because this is about you and your learning, like your sister's doing her school thing, your brother's doing his school thing, I still expect you to like check in with them as well. And again, just this mentorship on showing them how to manage and navigate relationships when they're in a change season. Right. So again, thinking about, hey, what are some of the things that I can expect and you can expect from me around how we're going to make sure that we're still kind of connected and plugged into everybody. So, a few of those kind of rules of engagement. The other little piece that Hunter and I found really useful was whenever we said, see you later, we always knew when we would see one another again. And that wasn't, you have to come home every single Friday, right? Or you have to come home on every single holiday. It was, we knew that there was a date in the calendar when we would be able to see each other again. And why I thought that was really helpful. And it wasn't like so I could pine and count down the sleeps and the nights until I get to see him again. It was just so that way, when we're navigating these big emotions and these big feelings, I would be able to say to that weary, tender heart that was desperately missing my big, okay, I'm going to see him again this weekend. And I hope he makes the best of the time that he's doing his thing. And I will make the best of the time where I'm doing my particular thing. And I found with Ava, when she was transitioning to post secondary, we navigated like different pieces. And I found it just a little bit challenging at times because Ava took a lot of the courses that I actually used to teach. And so I wanted to make sure that we had kind of a clear understanding that yes, you're taking this, like she's studying kinesiology, but there was about some psych courses and social science courses in her program. So before she even started into, for example, her first year psych, she knows I've taught this course. It was like, okay, sister, this is how I can be a supporter and a mentor for you with some of this curriculum. But like, let's just be clear, like, I'm like, this is still your responsibility to learn this. So, yes, I can help you a lot. And I want to see you develop those skill sets and the learning to learn skills to be able to learn this psych stuff. I got your back 100%. I could only imagine if I was a first year student and I was, let's say, struggling with a topic that my mom happened to have a lot of experience in, I would be super cheesed if I like was in a panic or a stressful moment and I reached out and be like, can you just do this part for me? And she said no. Right. I'd be just like, it would hurt my feelings. So that's why I wanted to kind of get ahead of some of those kind of different pieces. I hope that makes sense. The other little part in terms of with high school for our last ones, in terms of especially our seniors, one of the things that I think is so unfortunate is when I hear people like, what are you going to do with your life to our boys and girls and students in grade 12? Like, oh my gosh, so much pressure. I still even remember somebody asking me one time, oh, what are you going to do with your psychology degree, Robin? And I said to them, I'm going to frame it. I'm going to frame my psychology degree. And they're like, no, no, no. What are you going to do with it in terms of your job? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not there yet. I'm literally just trying to course by course, class by class. I wasn't thinking too far into the future because again, I want to make sure people are enjoying where they are right now. I think there's this again this pressure that we have to have all of these skills so that way we'll one day be in the future and it'll all make sense. Well, I'm in a future that I once imagined about and I don't know what that looks like per se. It's still changing, it's still evolving and giving people the confidence and the permission and the freedom to enjoy what they're doing to set them up for success, absolutely. But this doesn't have to be all or nothing. This is part of learning, and learning is messy. Learning is disruptive, and just to enjoy it, to be able to show up and find little moments. One of the last little kind of pieces I can share with you around kind of the transition back to school is I love the beginning of September in Ontario and in Canada. A lot of our students go back after the Labor Day weekend. To me, it's the real New Year's, right? I know everybody else, it seems like, celebrates Old Year's Night on December 31st or January 1st, New Year's Day. I celebrate the beginning of the school year because to me, it's just this beautiful snapshot in time of new beginnings. And just because maybe, last year we didn't have our bestest year, that doesn't mean that this year can't feel different or look different, or we can't maybe approach it in a different way. So enjoying this as a new year, a new opportunity, a time to build new habits and routines and rituals and practices. In Ontario and in Canada, it's an opportunity to enjoy the fall, the changing of the season. And again, there's no one right way to do any of this, just keeping it in a system that works for you and your family and enjoying the ride. Because I really think supporting our kids through the school, it literally is just buckle up and enjoy the ride. And the last little invitation I'd give you here, when your kiddos come home, one of the most unhelpful questions to ask any ager child is, how was your day? That's going to elicit for so many of them a freezing response or like a fawning response where you're going to get fine or good, right? And like my invitation, instead of asking kind of anyone like, how was your day? Because that could be an extremely complicated assessment, a very difficult thing to answer. It's like, okay, well, this part was okay. That part wasn't so hot. I kind of like this. I didn't really like that. Like, wow, what a huge, massive question. So when my kiddos, when they were little, came home from school, first and foremost, remember that reunion behavior. So make sure your face lights up when you see them. Be so excited just to see them. So when that little one maybe is running to you, run to them as well. Like just embrace and enjoy that reunion. As Toni Morrison said, our face needs to light up. And as I shared before, it's a practice I've done since my kiddos were little, even to the point where some of my children's friends refer to me as the golden retriever of mothers because I get so excited to see my people. And all you need to do is say, I'm so excited to see you. I love seeing you at the end of the day, and bite our tongues when it comes to the like, and how was your day? And instead, just like be in the moment of the reunion. And my gentle little tip here is like snacks, right? Even if they're gigantic, even if they're a second, third year university, when you do get a chance to get together again before you dive into updates, I always encourage snacks, even if it's just a cheese string and a goldfish. Doesn't matter. Goldfish crackers, just for context. But what happens is just connect, be in community first, and then maybe ask some questions about some curiosities. Just be like, "Oh, I'm so curious, can you tell me something today that was like, was there a boring part of your day? Or tell me a little bit about a part of your day that you want to share." And just in creating that container. So tell me about a little part of your day. Or who did you sit beside at lunchtime today? Or, was there, what was a time of the day that you felt like you were really excited? Or did anything funny happen today? Like putting just this in this little kind of container. And I know people always say when we're talking to folks, we need to ask them open ended questions to try and encourage dialogue. But if you close ended questions, if you just close in the questions just to start, it's okay too, right? It's okay too. And again, I just encourage us being a wee bit more open to letting them kind of warm up to this idea of having big shares. The other piece too, I remember it's those ear to ear conversations. So like sitting someone down on the couch and looking at them and be like, okay, tell me about your day. Wow, overwhelming. Versus like, I remember when especially Ava was navigating a tricky season, when I would meet her at the bus stop. At the time we had our chocolate lab, and I remember I would meet her with Luna, and then we would just go for a little bit of a walk before we went home. It just gave her a chance to kind of acclimate and just kind of like settle before we went into the house, right? So, whatever little transition ritual you can think about perhaps could be useful for you too. All right, my friends, I hope that was helpful. Again, there's no one right way to do this. And I encourage you just to enjoy it. Just make the best of it in terms of what works for you and your family. And I wish each and every one of you a very successful transition back into the school year. And I'm also excited to tell you that we are going to be having our very first guest on Resiliency Redefined next week. Please tune in for that episode. This is the first time I'm going to be having a guest. I think this guest is going to be somebody you might recognize, somebody you might heard of before. So it's going to be pretty fun to be able to welcome our first guest next week on Resiliency Redefined. So please tune in, take good care, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.